Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 371, and today's date is May 20th, 2014. And the title of this episode is Russia and China Strategically Position Themselves Against the Dollar. Now, we hear a lot about global reset, and what we're seeing right now is the unfolding of this global reset. We can see with our own eyes what is happening across the world. And when we say global reset, what do we actually mean? Well, what we are seeing and what's occurring at this point is that the dollar will start losing its value across the United States. And countries and central banks around the world will start to drop the dollar. They will see they do not need this anymore. And how do we know this? Well, we look around the world and we see China and Russia making deals. China has been positioning itself for a couple of years now, making bilateral trade deals all across the world, setting up clearinghouses. And the only nation that's not involved in this is the United States. Russia has been pushed now into creating their own payment system. They are not going to be using the dollar whatsoever. The United States has placed sanctions on individuals, and these individuals are pulling their money out of the West. So what is going on here? Well, the powers, the central bankers of the private Western central bank countries, they realize we are headed for a major collapse, and there is absolutely no way out of this, and they see that countries are losing faith in the dollar, and they are going to continually remove it from their reserves, and they're going to use other currencies besides the dollar. And what happens at this point is we see inflation here in the United States. And just recently, we have been seeing inflation quite a bit. And it's going to continue. It's going to start to increase. It's going to multiply as the year goes along, because this is the reset. Before we know it, inflation turns into hyperinflation, and it speeds up, and it cannot be stopped. The prices of goods are going to rise so fast you will not be able to purchase anything with the amount of money that you're making. And they realize that all of this is happening right now, and this is why we see an escalated military push all across the world. And wherever the United States is, it is happening in these regions. We see it out in the Pacific. We see it in Africa. We see it in the Middle East. We see it in Europe where Ukraine is. We see it happening everywhere, and it's not going to stop, because the central bankers will continue with their mission. They will not stop until they can get an event started to create a war to cover up this entire collapse. But we have to look at this. We see that the economy is collapsing. We see it every day. We see it with retail. We see it with real estate. We see it with this manipulated illusion. All these numbers that they've created for us, unemployment, inflation, GDP, have been created and modified and manipulated to keep this illusion alive. They're having trouble continuing with this. How much can they manipulate until it's like, okay, that is enough? We can't do it anymore. It's starting to not make sense. And that's what's happening right now. Everything that we look at doesn't make sense. They use excuses like the weather. The weather is the problem. That's why retail sales aren't good. Well, we're in the spring months. It's been warm. It's been sunny. It's been beautiful. I mean, yes, there are places where it's raining, but otherwise everything is okay. And guess what we're seeing? No improvement. All that pent-up demand where they're saying that people didn't want to come out and buy the real estate, put their house up for sale, and buy retail. Where is it? Non-existent. All those people that were sitting home in the winter because they didn't want to go out shopping, they could have shopped on the internet. So we should have seen a surge in internet sales. Where is it? Non-existent. I've been over this in many reports with percentages and facts. We are not seeing anything at this time. Their story is falling apart. And when we look even further, it gets worse. Real estate is getting and looking like 2007 going into 2008. This is not a good sign. This is not a good sign for anyone, because as this continues and more countries remove the dollar from their reserves, and you have to remember from 2000 up until this point, in 2000 we had 55% of the country's central banks held the dollar in reserves. It is down to 33%, and they're looking by the end of this year it's going to be down to 20 to 25%. And as this number, this percentage decreases, what happens? We see inflation here. The value of the dollar crumbles apart. We lose the value. It's completely imploding on itself, and we're having huge problems now, and they don't know what else to do, because they couldn't get into Syria, they couldn't get into Iran to prop this up, and this is what they need to continually do. They need to push the debt into more and more countries to keep the system going. They are running out of countries. They are coming to the end here, and they realize it. This is why they're continually telling us with all their double speak about how great the economy is going to do, that the second half of this year is going to be incredible. Unemployment's going to hit in the 5% range, and everything will be fine. And you know that all these government officials, every single time they tell you this, think of the opposite. If they're telling you it's going to be great, it's going to be horrific. If they're telling you that there are more jobs out there and they're going to create jobs, think of the opposite. They can't create jobs. They don't have the ability to do it. It's just the government. All they do is they're supposed to keep everything in order. And right now it is chaos. It's all out of order because they haven't been concentrating on taking care of the people. They've been concentrating on taking care of themselves, keeping their buddies, their friends, and everyone else with money, with contracts. And now the system is coming down, and they realize this. This is why they're out there demonizing China. They couldn't place sanctions on them right away because there was nothing to sanction. They didn't do anything. So they had to make something up. They had to say, oh yes, they were in cyber attacking and using cyber espionage against the United States. They had to make this up. Now they can say, oh, you know what? Let's bring some sanctions onto China. What do you think that's going to do to the United States if they actually went ahead and placed sanctions on the entire country, which I don't believe they're going to do. They didn't do it to Russia because they know for a fact it would bring the system down. Instead, they're going to provoke them a little bit. And this is what they do. Everywhere you look, you see a little bit provoke, a little bit provoke, a little bit provoke. Let's see if they do something. Eventually, if these countries do nothing, they will do it and make it look like these countries attacked or did something. Just like they're doing in Iran. They have this agreement with this nuclear agreement where they have the interim deal, and that comes up July 20th. Well, the United States continually puts on more and more terms into this deal, and Iran's saying, well, this has nothing to do with the original deal. We're not abiding by this. Well, we want it. And what they're doing is they're running out the clock. They're continually doing this, and at the end they're going to say, listen, this is all we wanted. They didn't want to abide by it, and they decided the deal's off. Now we got to go in and attack them. And they're continually doing this all over the world, and we see it. It's right in front of our eyes. And we see the global reset coming. We see what China and Russia are doing. We see what the other BRIC nations are doing because they're going to join in on this. We see the United States central bankers starting conflicts all around the world, trying to maintain control as best they can to keep this system propped up because they don't want to be blamed for what's coming. And when it comes, it's going to hit hard. It's going to come down so fast, people are going to go, what just happened? They just told us everything was fine. The stock market went from 16,000 points down to 4,000. You're going to see people jumping from buildings, killing themselves. People running in the streets not knowing what to do. Your relatives, your friends are going to be crying because they lost all their wealth. I mean, I remember when in 2008 when I visited my wife's uncle, he was sitting there telling me how he lost his entire retirement. It's gone. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh my God, he was pacing around the room. This is going to be 10 times worse. We are not going to come out of this. They're going to use a war to shift all the blame onto someone else because they don't want to be held accountable for this collapse. And they know there's going to be martial law. They know they're going to have to activate DHS. The lists are going to come out. They know they're going to have to come after these people who pose a threat to their power because they're going to want to keep their power. They're not going to want to let it go. You can see it in Ukraine. They are continually pushing and pushing and pushing. They will not stop. They will use any tactic necessary to get what they want. And here in the United States, they've been trying to remove our rights, remove and disarm the American people, to push and keep us down, to make it feel like you don't deserve these rights. You don't deserve to have the freedom of speech. You don't deserve to not be searched. We could do whatever we want to you. If we want to search you, we'll search you. If we want to spy on you, we'll spy on you. If we want to read your email, we'll read your email. It doesn't matter to us anymore. We will censor anyone. We will put you in fenced areas if you would like to talk freely. This is how they think of us, the people of the United States. This is how they're showing us how they actually feel. All this talk about Obama coming out, how he's going to create jobs and do all this stuff, this is all lip service to get everyone riled up. Over all these years that he talked about it, what has happened? Absolutely nothing. Instead, they manipulated the numbers. They changed the facts. They made people believe that the economy was getting better. That's all they did. They did nothing else. Nothing else was done in this country. Actually, what has happened? The country got worse. There are more people on food stamps. There are more people unemployed. Now they want taxes to help the infrastructure. Do you really think they're going to use these taxes for the infrastructure when the government is in so much debt? They can't make ends meet. They don't have enough tax revenue coming in to cover their expenses. Do you really think that's why they're calling for taxes all of a sudden on the infrastructure? No, they're going to use these taxes for what they need it for, and it's not going to be for the infrastructure. Why do you think they created Obamacare? They needed tax revenue. That fell apart. Why do you think they're pushing climate change? Because they want these taxes. Have they ever told us what they're going to use this money for with climate change, eventually when they impose all these taxes? What's their solution? If you ever notice, the government never has a real solution. They only tell you what the problem is and how they need to collect money. They don't tell you, here is our 10-step plan, and this is how we're going to make it better. This is where all your money's going to go. We laid it out for you. And here it is. They never do that. They just tell you, here are the problems, we need your money. Where does that money go? Nobody knows. They can never answer that question. And that's why all of this and all this lip service they're telling us, they are going to do absolutely nothing. They're just going to take the tax money. And every single economy that is in the end game, any country that is falling apart, they just impose more and more taxes. They tell you they're going to use it for good. They're going to use it for good. They just want the money. That's all they want. They want your obedience, and that's what they're looking for. Let's get into the economic collapse news, and later in the report we're going to get into what China and Russia are doing and how they're positioning themselves against the dollar. Now, we can see all throughout Europe, they are in a state of a depression right now. Every single one of these countries is not doing well. Yes, they can spin it that they are. They can show us that, oh, look, GDP went up by 0.0001%. Look, it's all improving. No, it's not. It's an illusion. These numbers are meaningless because the next month they revise them, and all of a sudden we're down negative 0.5% or negative 1.0%. And it's a complete illusion. And right now, if we look at Italy, we look at France, we look at Cyprus, Greece, any one of these countries, we see that it is getting worse. And actually in Italy, Bad loans are surging 26% year over year. This is the 59th month in a row, and it is not getting better. Unemployment is continually going up. Debt is continually going up. And austerity is continuing across all of these countries. So it really isn't getting better. And there's a report out there saying that millions of Europeans are poor despite having a full-time job. And you think to yourself, how could this possibly be? They have a full-time job and they're poor? Well, 13 million Europeans fall below the EU poverty line despite having full-time jobs, especially in Germany, according to a new analysis of the European Trade Union Institute. At the same time, the number of poor full-time workers has grown over the past 5 years. Workers can be counted as poor if they earn 50% or less than the average in a specific country. In some sectors, the real wage has fallen between 10 and 18% in only a few years. And we're seeing this all over the place. Those people who are working, they are not really getting raises. They're not getting the cost of living raises. Salaries are actually going down. And what do we see? Food going up, energy going up, prices on services are going up. It's a system that is falling apart. It cannot be sustained. And I understand they want to raise the minimum wage to help people out, but this is not a fix. This is a piece of tape on the bigger problem. This will only help in a short period of time, because let's look back over time. How many times did they up the minimum wage? Did it really help anyone? Yes, it did for a short period of time, but guess what? We end right back where we were. Milk went from $4 to $8. Oh, that minimum wage is canceled out. So it really is meaningless. Let's go to the heart of the problem, and the heart of the problem is the central bankers. We need to get rid of them. They're causing it because it is a corporation. It is separate and apart from the government. Their agenda is not for the people. It is for themselves, and it's for profit. And that's where we need to go. Now, we can see all across the United States that the weather had nothing to do with the retail sales. The weather had nothing to do with real estate, because what we're getting in now is information from the retail sector saying, yeah, sales aren't looking too good and the weather's been nice. But they always throw in, they're just coming out of this winter weathery problem that we had, and that's why their retail sales are just barely starting to recover. No, they're not recovering. They're getting worse. Staples forecast fall in sales. Everything is falling apart. Dick's Sporting Goods hit by weak golf sales. Urban Outfitters, TJ Maxx, Ross Stores, Lowe's, all declining in sales. Home Depot reported lower than expected quarterly sales. A slowing recovery in the U.S. housing market could make it difficult for the Home Depot to meet its sales growth. Really, they're admitting it. There's something wrong with the real estate market. It's not getting better. And you have to remember, like Lowe's and Home Depot, they're hardware stores. They sell salt, snow blowers, shovels, everything that you need for the winter. And if the winter and the snow was that bad, don't you think sales would have increased dramatically and helped them out? And now we're coming into the spring. Flowers, fertilizer, grass, they're seasonal. Yes, they also have lumber, but they also have seasonal items. It's not helping whatsoever. The housing market is falling apart, and this is why we see home furnishing appliance stores doing so poorly. Now it's spreading to Home Depot and Lowe's. We saw this back in 2008, starting in 2008, going to the crash of October in 2008 of the stock market. The sales were decreasing because housing sales were decreasing. We can see it happening right now. Now, Caterpillar, of course, back in December of 2013, look, everything's fine. Yeah, we closed all these plants, laid off 40,000 people. Everything looks great. Stock's going back up. But guess what? Their sales were continually declining. And here we are in 2014, and Caterpillar sales plunged by 13%. It's not getting better. Their whole entire sales is completely imploding on itself. Worldwide sales, not doing it. It's completely falling apart because the world economies are falling apart. And I should say that private Western central bank economies are completely falling apart. And all those sales in Europe and the United States and in South America, they're just not happening. And they're continually closing plants, furloughing people, trying to keep this together here, but sales are completely declining. Now, we understand Common Core is completely being developed to dumb down our next generation. And there were a lot of experts, and I talked about this, or a lot of experts out there saying, yes, Common Core is completely going to dumb down the next generation, and it will only take one generation. But what we're finding out is that within Common Core, there's a lot of data mining going on, a lot of spying on the students. And they're doing this, and they're selling this data to corporations. With all the Common Core and all the laptops and everything where they have to use them, all the sites they have to go to, they're going to be recording keystrokes. They're going to be recording the sites the students visit. If they give them laptops to use at home, those will be hooked in and they'll have full spyware on there so they can keep track of what these students are doing. And what this goes on to say is that the data is collected is being sold as a beneficial purpose. Well, first of all, they're selling the data. And what beneficial purpose would this be? To help track a student's progress and find areas where a student needs to help. Well, you're trying to tell me where they are looking on the website, what sites they're going to, what they're typing in. This is really going to help a student? No, this is called data mining, and you're just getting the information for advertising purposes, what products we can sell to them, and this is why they're selling this information. Educational startups and small businesses have the opportunity to collect more data on its users than even companies like Netflix, Facebook, and even Google. Students are tracked as they play online games, watch videos, read books, take quizzes, and run labs in physical education. The monitoring continues as they work on assignments from home, with companies logging children's locations, homework schedules, web browsing habits, and of course, their academic progress. Parents are growing concerned because these companies aren't clear with how they're using this data. Even school districts aren't exactly kept in the loop, and they have no idea what this data is going to be used for, because what they're doing is they're going to be selling it to companies. They're going to be making money off of it. It's going to go to the government, and they're going to keep track of all these students. Not to help them educational-wise, but to help them make profits. These companies are going to use this information for profit. The government is going to use this information because it will allow them to put social profiles together with these students and track them throughout their lives. This is why they're using all of this. Now, let's switch over to what's happening around the world right now. In Thailand, they have declared martial law because the people are rising up. They've had enough. They don't want this puppet regime in Thailand anymore. And of course, the government, the U.S., the armed forces in Thailand have declared martial law. And of course, they're saying, yeah, we declared martial law, but there's going to be no coup right now. But it's very strange that they would actually mention a coup as they're declaring martial law. And you can see that the people are not happy with the existing government. They want them out. They want democracy. They want freedom. They want the ability to vote who they want to vote for. And guess what the government doesn't want them to do? Well, they don't want them to have freedom. They don't want them to have democracy. We see this happening there. We see it in the Middle East. We see it in Ukraine. Wherever there is a puppet regime, there is no democracy. There is no freedom. There is only dictatorship and control. That's all we see. Now, Russia is making deals with China, as we know. Russia has also offered to zero out the mineral extraction tax for gas fields that supply gas to China under a future contract. China, for its part, has said it is ready to scrap import duty on Russian gas. So here they are making deals. They're removing taxes to make it better for them. And again, this all bypasses the US dollar. It is not involved whatsoever. Russia and China has also signed the non-dollar settlement deal with Russia's largest bank. VTB, among Russia's largest bank, has signed a deal with the Bank of China to pay each other in domestic currencies. bypassing the need for the U.S. dollar. And you're going to see other BRIC nations join in on this. And before you know it, none of these countries, and there's about 80 right now that have been joining the BRIC nations, they're all going to start not using the U.S. dollar. This is the global reset that is coming right now. The value of the dollar is falling apart. And this is when you'll start seeing inflation. Under the agreement, the banks plan to develop their partnership in a number of areas, including cooperation on the ruble and renminbi, settlements, investing banking, interbanking lending, trade finance, and capital market transactions. Our countries have done a huge job to reach a new historic landmark. China has firmly settled in a position of our key trade partner. If we sustain this pace, the level of bilateral trade of $100 billion will be reached by 2015. That's only, what, 6 months away? Increasing investment cooperation is crucial. Together, it will be possible to discuss investment in various projects much more efficiently and clearly. They are pushing this forward. This will not include the dollar. They are making their move. They are strategically positioning themselves to be independent of the U.S. dollar at this point. They'll sooner than later, there will be no need to even look at the dollar. They won't even need it. Then other countries, you can see what's going to happen here. It's going to be like a domino effect. Other countries will look on and say, you know what? The dollar is decreasing. More nations are removing it. And this is why China has made deals all around the world. New Zealand, Australia, UK, Canada, Switzerland, and Brazil, Argentina, many countries, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Israel. All these countries are coming online and going to deal with China and Russia. They already have clearinghouses set up. They already have bilateral trade agreements. This whole thing is being designed to be independent of the dollar. So every single country will feel comfortable dropping the dollar because it is dying. And the United States central bankers realize what is happening. And this is why they're trying to start war anywhere they possibly can. Now, we understand that the central bankers are very angry with all these deals that are going on because it is a direct threat to the dollar. And, of course, we understand that they are telling us that China cyber attacked and they're using cyber espionage on all the companies in the United States and on the government, nuclear facilities, solar panel facilities. And, of course, China's out there saying this is absolutely ridiculous. And China went ahead and they're saying that all government agencies within China will not be installing Windows 8 operating system on their systems. And, of course, this is only going to hurt Microsoft because they're going to be missing all those sales. And we can also see that China also put out a list of what type of attacks the United States does. And of course we know that the United States has been cyber attacking and spying on countries all around the world and doing a little bit of cyber espionage themselves. So China calls the U.S. the biggest attacker of cyberspace. From March 19th to May 18th, they claim to have found 135 host computers in the U.S. carrying 563 phishing pages, targeted Chinese sites that directly controlled 1.18 million computers. And we know for a fact the NSA intercepts computers, installs information and firmware and spyware on these computer systems. They had deals with Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, where they had backdoors to get into their systems, and these computers were sent all over the world. So we know that every single country is doing this. There's really no one innocent at this point. But the whole point of this is that the United States needed something to push the agenda because they see what's happening out there. They see China is a complete direct threat to the dollar, and now the agenda is being pushed forward. These deals are being made, and they can see the dollar is completely falling apart, and they need to protect it somehow. So now they have the ability to say that China was spying on the United States. We're going to hold these people and indict these people, and now since we did that, we can place sanctions on certain government officials, and this is what they're going to try to do. Okay, now in the Ukraine parliament has voted that they would like all troops to be removed from the southeast section of Ukraine. Now, this isn't the puppet regime. This is the parliament in Ukraine, and they voted. Ukraine troops deployed in the country's east should immediately return to their bases, the country's parliament said in a memorandum. With 226 votes required to pass the law, the Ukrainian parliament finally adopted the so-called Memorandum of Peace and Consent. 252 parliamentary people voting in favor, and we will have to see what the acting government does, who's controlled by the United States and central bankers. Will they pull these forces out, or will they intensify and ignore what the parliament has said? And we'll have to see how this plays out. Now, Kiev is offering to pay Gazprom the gas debt in 10 days if they bring it back to the discounted rate. And of course, Russia, Gazprom, is out there saying no. The current rate is what it is, and you need to pay it, because this is the going rate in Europe. The only reason we had the discounted price is because we were able to use Crimea to have our base there, and the Ukraine government at that time allowed us to use the base and bring in our ships, and we gave them a discount for the gas. Since Crimea is now part of Russia, there's no more discount because we own it. So you have to pay the full amount. And of course, if you notice what the acting government is doing is they're playing games. They don't really want to pay. They keep saying, oh, if you do this, we'll pay it. Oh, if you do this, we'll pay it. And they know for a fact that they are not going to do any of what they're asking. They want the full amount. Now, what we're seeing here is that the Ukraine acting government, which is controlled by the United States central bankers, is saying that the issue of making advance payments for Russian gas is outside the current agenda, which they're saying is we're not going to pay in advance for gas. No, we're not doing it. And we're going to have to see what happens with Russia, because they said if they don't pay by June, they're going to shut it off. Do I think they're going to shut it off? I don't think so. I think they're going to make some other terms, but you never know what's going to happen here. And I think the United States central bankers, the acting government, really does wish they shut it off, because this would allow them to make another move against Russia. And I think they're hoping that they do shut it off, because again, they'll turn it around and blame it on Russia that they shut off the gas, they're hurting the people, and of course they didn't pay. And I know in my home, if I don't pay the gas or electric, they send me a notice and they tell me I have a certain number of days, and if I don't make a payment in those days, they shut it off. And then you have to pay an extra fee to turn it back on. So I don't know what they're trying to do here at this point, but it looks like they're trying to provoke Russia. Now, Kiev authorities, the acting government there, decided to freeze pension payment in Slavansk and Kramatorsk. And the Ministry of Social Policy of the Ukraine has suspended pension payment to senior citizens living in these regions because the ongoing turmoil in these regions, and they decided to freeze the pension payments. Now, I don't know what the older population are doing in this region. Most of them probably have a tough time walking around or getting around, and as people age, it gets tougher and tougher, and to freeze their pensions is really not going to have an effect except on these poor people. And I don't know why they're including these people, but I guess they're trying to make their point, and they're trying to do anything they possibly can to hurt the southeast regions. Now, out in the Pacific here, Japan is going to establish a strategic military outpost near the disputed island, the Senkaku Islands. Tokyo has reportedly made plans to create a new military outpost on remote islands close to disputed territories, in an apparent move to bolster Japan's defense capabilities amid its ongoing territorial problems with China. Some 350 ground self-defense forces could be stationed on the 3 islands near the disputed islands. So they're pushing their bases out. They're surrounding these islands because they realize eventually this whole propaganda is going to go full steam, and they're going to try to provoke China into doing something. Now, out in Libya, we understand we have this rogue general running around, and what's happening is that more and more forces, those who are loyal to the Libyan government, have switched sides, and they have gone with the rogue general. And right now, it seems like this might be a setup where I said this yesterday, that this rogue general is being controlled by the United States, and they're trying to take over the country and make it look like that this general is trying to take power of the country and push out the existing government, or this is being set up so they can bring in military forces into the country. It is not really clear at this time, but we see it's very odd that all of a sudden this rogue general was introduced, and he's running around. Military forces are changing sides. He's running around saying that he's going to remove all terrorists, and the battle will continue until all terrorism is eradicated. And we're going to have to see what his true intentions are, because he does have connections to the CIA. He worked with the CIA to bring down Gaddafi at the time. And this kind of looks like they're trying to wreak havoc on the country more so than before, so they can actually say, you know what, the government doesn't have control. We need to come in and take control of this country. And what makes me believe this is that the U.S. is mulling whether to close the Libyan embassies. And every time they make the announcements that, oh, travel alert, embassy closures, that means they are planning something in the region. And right now, Washington is closely monitoring an upsurge of violence in Libya, but has not decided yet whether to order the closure of its embassy in Tripoli, a U.S. official said. We remain very concerned about the violence over the weekend in Tripoli and Benghazi, and we are looking at everything, and we are telling them our message to all of them is to refrain from this violence. And of course, as soon as you see those embassies closed down, that means the United States is ready to do something. This is what happens in every single one of these countries. Now, the United States is preparing to go into South Sudan. The U.S. military is preparing for an operation. They hired this company and awarded them a contract of about $8.5 million to an American firm to provide helicopter service for the U.S. Army. The Pentagon said that the services by AAR Airlift Group would enable the Army to operate in South Sudan and neighboring states, because they're getting ready for a big operation. But it's very odd that they had to hire a private airlift company to do this, and why isn't the United States using its own helicopters for this operation? But again, they're going into South Sudan because everywhere China is, the United States central bankers are, and this is why these operations are continuing all over the place. Now, yesterday I mentioned that Jordan was beefing up their soldiers along the border of Syria. We understand the elections for Assad are coming up on June 3rd, and what we're seeing right now is that this is a huge exercise going on, and it just so happens to be around the election time of Assad. Jordan has disclosed plans for a major military exercise starting May 25th. It's going to be a 2-week exercise and will contain more than 13,000 troops from 24 friendly countries that are against Assad. The exercise will consist of ground, air, naval force comprising a total of more than 13,000 soldiers. And there's going to be about 6,000 U.S. troops which are expected to participate in this exercise. We have to remember one thing here. Back in June of 2013, the United States brought in military assets, and they were having training exercises during June into July, and then all of a sudden we had a false flag in August about chemical weapons. Here, this force is about, 3 times bigger than before. The military assets are still there, and they even brought in anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons for the paid mercenaries. These exercises will go through the June 3rd elections into June 8th. It looks like they could be making a strike into Syria. Now, like I said before, they might try to take out Assad with an assassination attempt. If that doesn't work, they're going to move to the next phase, and they will create some type of an event where they need to bring in these troops. Now, what this event will be, it could be here in the United States, it could be in Europe, it could be in both, because we understand that explosives have been shipped around the world, and supposedly they've gone to embassies and they have gone to Ukraine and many unknown locations of where all this has gone. Now, the weapons that the paid mercenaries have, the anti-aircraft, the anti-tank, well, it looks like they're using them. They brought down their first Syrian military plane and they downed it, and we can see they've been trained. They are using them at this point, and this is going to be pushed forward. Absolutely. Now, the propaganda is out there. The FBI is warning there could be Russian spies lurking in the U.S. tech sector in the United States. And again, they're bringing this propaganda full steam ahead because they have to demonize Russia and China. And they're saying that Russia might have infiltrated our tech companies, because back when we were friendly with Russia, there was some cooperation with Russia coming in, working with the tech companies, and the FBI is very concerned about this now because they could have placed malware and viruses, and they really could, have done stuff to the tech companies, and all the technology that has been put out there. They could have infiltrated and done something. And we can see they are completely using this as propaganda at this time. Now, there is another propaganda going around about Syria using chlorine gas once again, and they said they used it again on Monday. They're blaming it on Assad. The Syria regime faces new charges of unleashing chlorine on a village alleged to have suffered several deadly strikes with gas previously. Anti-government advocates, the paid mercenaries, said a 14-year-old boy died on Monday from the assault, the focal point for a series of alleged chlorine attacks. And they're saying, yes, this came from Assad, and they're continually pushing this propaganda to make everyone believe that Assad, while his chemical weapons are being removed from his country, that he was going to use chemical weapons. But it doesn't make sense, because he was winning the war against the paid mercenaries. He was taking control of the country. Why would he resort to chemical weapons at this time, or using chlorine gas? He wouldn't. The only people that would use this are the paid mercenaries, the United States central bankers, Israel, and the Arab countries, and the other friendly paid mercenary countries. They are losing. They're the ones who are desperate. They're the ones who would use the gas. And you can see they are continually doing this. They are desperate at this time, and they are ready to go with some type of strike and event. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.